Hello, it's Cryptolyze. I hope you are well on this Friday 22, December 2023. We're meeting today to talk about SOL, Solana's crypto. So I'm going to come back to what Solana is, the usefulness of SOL in the Solana ecosystem. We're going to come back a little bit to Solana's liabilities and what is happening to understand the upward acceleration of Solana, how important it is, what will happen next, and we will talk a little bit about the notion of registration because that it is important when we are going to talk about the acceleration of Solana, and then we will go into the graphs to project ourselves in the short, medium, long term on purchase prices, sale prices, and it starts right away. If you want to train and really enjoy bull running, it's simple. There is perfect, complete, free training available. It's through an educational journey that teaches you everything about blockchain, crypto, investment, technical analysis, and trading. All this for free in comments and descriptions. You have exercises, multiple choice questions, modules, videos, guides, everything to support you in your progress. We start with Solana, explaining what Solana is. So it's already a level 1 blockchain. You have to understand that it was born at the time when we really had the advent of decentralized finance. So it was born before, it was built before, but the explosion in Solana's knowledge really came from that. Because we were in an Ethereum killer theme, Solana never really wanted to be an Ethereum killer, but that didn't change the fact that it was the current theme of Layer 1 in which we were looking for solutions other than Ethereum to be able to do decentralized finance because it was very, very expensive. And what is interesting is that Solana proposed a solution which is different, in which we end up with a layer 1 which has transaction fees which are really very, very low. We are talking about 0.25. Agreement, really very, very weak. With a lot of output, we are talking about going up to more than 50,000 transactions per second. So we are going to calm down because we are still very, very far from that for the moment. But above all, they talked about the notion of proof of history. It's a concept that actually makes it possible to validate a transaction without having the entire history of the blockchain because we don't need to go back that far. We really only rely on the last 2 days to be able to validate whether or not a transaction is coherent. And especially Solana, they succeeded in a very strong bet. It was to convince a certain number of developers to switch to Rust, therefore a technology which is still not necessarily very simple, and above all, which does not not next to Solidity. There were a lot of smart contract developers who were in Solidity, quite a few who were on other technologies, and they managed to really create an ecosystem around that. While we were really in a fashion in 2021 of the EVM-compatible, therefore, blockchains, which were Ethereum-compatible, in which we could carry smart contracts in Solidity, and that was not the case. At the level of Solana, Solana took the opposite approach by really going into their own technology. And it was only recently, on July 19th, that they launched SOLANA, which is in fact a kit that allows you to directly port your smart contracts from Solidity to Solana to be able to deploy EVM smart contracts. Compatible. Besides, they have the possibility, finally, we have the possibility of developing in Go, in C#, in JavaScript, in TypeScript, etc., etc. They still have many, many other blockchains they made this bet. And it worked rather well, because they have a full-fledged community nearby. We find ourselves on a phone that they launched last year, which is called the Saga. At the beginning of this year, they started talking about it last year, and it is really the beginning of this year when there was the setting up the sale, in which we had the possibility of being able to buy a phone. The first phone that was crypto-friendly, in which we had the ability to easily create several wallets, import wallets, validate transactions, and it was a bit of a flop. Okay? I asked you about it and told you that it was still interesting because we suddenly had people who could be interested in the notion of the mobile stack, implied which allows to develop on mobile, which is very important if we want to achieve mass adoption. The fact that it was a flop was not that serious, especially since now it no longer exists. If you want to have a Saga phone, you have to pay between $2,000 and $5,000 on a secondary market. Why? Because we have here, when we actually bought the phone, we had 50 million bonk. So there is the same corner which is on Solana, except that the bonk made an explosion. And to have that people bought a Saga phone to recover precisely these millions of bonk is financed. Either the phone directly or financed much more. And that's what's interesting, is that we have this vision where the phone became an object to recover crypto and which was attached to this object. Well, that still raises a lot of questions when we start to have a commercial and marketing act that is worth more than the telephone. That's where we're really going to ask ourselves questions. Aside from Solana, It really specializes in the notion of NFTs with the capacity to be able to mint a lot of NFTs for very low costs. Here we are talking, for example, about minting 100 million NFTs for the equivalent of 1,000 in terms of gas costs, which is really very low, and they really want to instantiate themselves in there. They continue to work on it. They continue to directly instantiate the ease of deployment of Solana nodes because it is also a real problem for Solana nodes given that we are in profit history with only 2 days of delta behind to be able to validate the transactions that We expect that we will have a very high use of NVMe disks, which are the disks in which the data is written, and also that means that we need a machine which still costs a lot. To implement it also means that there is a form of reflection, use of nodes and profitability of nodes, which will be very important. Besides, we still have quite a few utilities at the level of Solana, where we have Helium, which arrived on Solana, we have HiveMapper, which arrived on Solana. We still have many protocols which originally had a blockchain have abandoned their blockchain to migrate directly to Solana because it's simpler because they have a development kit, because the team behind it is really there to support them. And therefore, for me, it is one of the really very strong signs that the Solana project is working. And remember, I was one of the few to tell you, but buy Solana when we go below the 10. No matter what happens with FTX, the community is there. No matter what Fed is around, the community is there. The guys work and develop. That's the most important. That's what we wait in a blockchain. If there are projects developing on it and the guys who build the blockchain are developing on it, that's the right sign and that's what we need. We don't look at anything other. Because in the long term, it is something that will be sustainable because they have already shown that they were capable of building a community of investors and a community of developers during the previous bull run, and that they were able throughout this bear market, despite all this. What happened to hold her? And that's why it's very important to look, to actually understand all that, to take a little step back. And when we look at the courses, because we had a big acceleration, we're going to explain why. We're going to talk a little bit about registrations too. So, just technically, we finished a cycle of 5 Elliotist waves during the previous bull run in which we still made an ATH at 250. We had a market cap which was around 70 billion, and we had a rather classic ABC 3-time retracement to then head here into an accumulation zone, which is the rather classic sign of weakness. And what is interesting to see is that we indeed have a breakdown of this accumulation zone for already a few days, a few weeks with here the rupture which took place around October 16, 2023. Therefore, which was at the same time the acceleration of the BTC, which was on October 23. If I don't say nonsense, and then we still had an anthology of acceleration at the level of Solana with some profit taking, which took place around the 60, which is rather classic. And then we had a second stop in the 70. And there we still made a 100 test. We returned at the same time. Here in the Mars zone, 2022. So, which was the Terra Luna zone? Very important to understand that the Solana has arrived at a really important zone, which is in fact the same zone as the BTC, more or less. Give or take a few euros, we could go up to 120. So we have arrived, in fact, in the same part here at the cycle level as BTC. It's really very important to understand that, and that it's one of the rare assets other than BTC to have done it. And precisely compared to someone who suffered excessively, we made up for part of the underperformance that we had in 2022 from Solana on this acceleration, on these accelerations recently. And it is also mainly driven by registrations. On this, I think that if you are interested, let me know in the comments, but I will make you a video on it. Inscriptions are a fashion that started with ordinals, which are not NFTs, which are inscriptions in the blocks of the blockchain in which we will instantiate NFT mints in quotes. It is just in the block itself. We will enter a piece of data which will be a small JSON file in which we will just simply say, for example, that such a token there is a quantity of time, and I mint a token of this one. There it is exactly that, and therefore that does not has no value, no use. But that doesn't prevent people from getting caught up in the ultra-speculative part of it, and a lot of tokens that revolve around that are also in Solana. And that's why we're seeing fees currently exploding on Ethereum. We see on Avalanche, we see on Phantom, we see on Polygon, we see on Arbitrum, we see on Optimism, and obviously on Solana. So which also explains that we currently have a craze for level 1 blockchains at the level of their gas token, because behind, there is the principle of the registrations that they are having. However, What is interesting to see is that we have established a very strong technical level with this break, in which the technical level of the 60 now is our new support, okay? Really 60, if we retouch the 60, it will be a potential buying zone to readjust the level of Solana here. Namely that we will always be in my spot zone when we break below the 75. I consider that Solana remains at a very good price in this area. Because for me, it is a token and a crypto and a technology that has proven itself and in which we could in fact have not a competitor to Ethereum, but something which will specialize other than Ethereum in a solution around NFTs, which would be interesting in the long term. So we could have a market cap which is higher than the previous market cap, so that means going above 70 billion. So what I like is on Twitter. Obviously, we always go even further. We consider that Ethereum is going to freak out, etc., etc. We are still very, very far away. You understand that the TVL really of Solana is a sham of the TVL of Ethereum at the moment, and yet I am someone who told you to buy when we were in these parts there and who defends Solana. Despite the fact that in 2022, they had several stops, etc., etc., I tell you that it is a very good project. But no more, we have to be realistic. It is possible that on very, very long term, we indeed arrive at the level of Ethereum and BTC. But at that point, BTC and Ethereum will continue to evolve, etc., okay? Flipping will not happen. Not right away, or really in a very, very long time. And then perhaps we will even have another technology that will replace. We are still very, very far away. But nevertheless, for me, we can look for targets which are completely coherent here in Wave 1. Wave 2, Wave 3 from Solana to find a target at 1,618 in the vicinity of $450, which would be quite consistent fact. Already for me, we are going to break the previous ATH, so we are going to do a new ATH, and then we are going to seek at the end of the bull run the objective 1,618, or even why not potentially seek a retest, just a small fuse to mark 500 at the level of Solana, which would at the same time be consistent with the evolution of the ecosystem and the strength of the ecosystem which is already present and which continues to develop around Solana. We have big projects, we have a big team, we have a big visibility, a big community. There is already everything, in fact, that is present. And many talk about Solana as being an Ethereum, like implying that there we was on a pre-cycle and there we could in fact have a master's cycle at the level of Solana, and therefore the target would not be around $500, but it would be more around $800, $900. But we are still very, very far from that. We are rather in part a speculative view, so we take a step back as usual. We do a risk management check. We take into consideration the portfolio we have in relation to Solana to be able to readjust our position. I hope this video helps you pleased. If so, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. It especially supports the channel. It makes me very happy. And we'll see you tomorrow for the weekly and the special Christmas videos.